Hi everyone, and welcome to this video where we're going to look at one of the modes of comparison in the comparative study on the Leaving Cert higher level English paper, cultural context. I've decided to separate each mode into its own short video just to make things easier for you all when trying to keep the modes separate in your own thinking. Make sure as well to download the blank notes sheet from the link in the description to use when you're making your notes on cultural context. So to begin with, let's take a step back from the exam paper for a moment and consider what culture and context really mean. So culture here means the ideas, customs and social behaviour of a particular group of people or society, while context means the specific circumstances that form the setting for an event or idea and that allow it to be better understood. So to look at an example, take reading. Nowadays, so in the context of today, reading is seen as a good thing. We want people to be literate so that they can read books and learn things. Our culture, in the context of today, actively encourages reading and teaching everyone how to read. But that's not always been the case. In many cultures and in many different contexts, reading has been, and in some places still is, seen as dangerous in the wrong hands. There have been books that have been banned or burned, or groups of people, often lower classes, women and minorities, who have been refused education in case they should learn to read for themselves and challenge their masters. So the simple act of reading can be incredibly subversive or dangerous depending on the cultural context. Let's take an example from a text. Again, I'm going to use The Handmaid's Tale as it is a text that many students are studying this year, and we're going to look at the most recent cultural context question, 2018. In part A of this question, you're asked to identify at least one type of behaviour that is considered unacceptable in the world of the novel. Well, if we take The Handmaid's Tale, we could choose the act of reading. In The Handmaid's Tale, the world of the novel is one where women are the property of men. They have no rights and are not even allowed to read. That seems like a really simple and straightforward answer. Choose an activity that is unacceptable. Well, reading is unacceptable in the novel. Despite how simple the response seems though, the rest of the question allows you to go into much more depth. The question goes on to ask you why the behaviour is unacceptable and what society's response to it is. This allows you to discuss the patriarchal system at work in the New Republic, Gilead in the novel, and society's view of women. The fact that they are not allowed to read indicates both an intolerance for women as anything other than childbearers, but it also shows a fear or a mistrust of women, that if they were allowed to read, that it might spread dangerous ideas. So the cultural context mode is asking you to look at the characters in the text and in the world of the text and see how they both shape and are shaped by the factors of their culture and context. Some of these factors include religion, gender, attitudes to sex and marriage, social status, class, wealth, poverty, politics, authority, and systems of government and control. Let's take a look at some of the recent cultural context questions that have come up on the exam paper. The question 2 from 2018 asks you to compare the aspect of cultural context in each of the texts you've studied that most impacts on the happiness or the success of a central character. So in this question, I would be looking to identify characters who face difficulties because of society's rules or social conventions. Think the strict social code of appropriate marriages in the world of Jane Austen's Persuasion, or think of the expectations placed upon Eilish in Brooklyn by her mother and the conventions of traditional Irish society. The 2016 question looks at the idea of power and who holds it. And this question would be a good opportunity to look at social status, class, wealth and poverty, and authority in your texts. Some of the other previous questions, as you can see here, are variations on the same idea. Social class, how the cultural context impacts upon a character and how they overcome them or succumb to them, and power. Here's a handy organizer that you can use and adapt for your own notes on cultural context. So we have on the left the list of key characters in your text, and then across the top some of the factors of cultural context that you can examine. As you can see, everything must come back to the character that you were discussing in your answer. You may identify a very interesting aspect of the cultural context, but you must make sure you explain how that impacts upon the character or the world of the text that you are discussing. Finally, I want to remind you of the key to the comparative that's discussed in the first video in this playlist, critical literacy. You are being encouraged to develop your own interpretations and ideas of the text you are studying. Remember that simple question, what if, and apply it to aspects of cultural context that you are focusing on or the character that you are discussing. I hope that you have found this video useful, and there's more on the way on the other modes of comparison. Please subscribe if you haven't already and leave a comment if you have any questions or suggestions.